This week on Jersey Matters, the Delta variant, vaccine hesitancy, mask mandates for children. We talk everything COVID with one of New Jersey's top medical minds, Dr. Ray Panettiere. What about natural immunity that you get if you already had COVID? New Jersey Senator Joe Panaccio is introducing legislation to make natural immunity equivalent to getting the vaccine in New Jersey. And we are still suffering shortages because of COVID. Housing, school bus drivers, now even beer, wine, and spirits. We are covering it all. Hello, I'm Larry Menti. Welcome to Jersey Matters. Let's get right to our interview with Dr. Ray Panettiere, Vice Chancellor at the Rutgers Institute for Translational Medicine and Science. Doctor, as always, thanks so much for your time. There is so much going on when it comes to COVID-19. I'm just going to throw out topic after topic, if that's okay, and get your opinion and your scientific knowledge about each of the topics. And let's start with the fact that many of us thought that by now, beginning of the new school year, we'd be in the clear. There was great hope when the vaccination came out. What happened?
Well, I think, by and large, there was a little bit of a curveball thrown with the Delta variant. The Delta variant had greater infectivity. It really affected those unvaccinated and really caused another surge, so to speak. And at the same time, even though we did really well with vaccinating, we are still not at the level we had hoped to be. There's a fair amount of vaccination hesitance. And the combination of a virus that's more infective, along with now residual vaccine hesitance, has thrown us, I wouldn't say off the rails, but has slowed the train a bit, Larry.
What do you say to people that are vaccine hesitant? How do you try to convince them?
Yeah, it's a tough. It's really tough because every individual needs to make their own decisions. The data, though, is overwhelmingly compelling that vaccines are saving lives and decreases infection. There's no argument there. So I try to be as forthright as possible, as transparent as possible. Vaccines are good. Vaccines have helped many people. Vaccines have eliminated diseases. But where we're at right now is, even though we're getting more and more vaccinated individuals daily, we're not keeping up to the same pace as the virus.
What about masks? The governor has a new mandate that every child, whether they're in daycare or in school, has to wear a mask at the age of 2 and over. Let me deal first with that 2 to 5 age group, because there are many studies out there, including a study by the WHO, that said it's not needed and it's actually counterproductive for children 2 to 5. But the CDC says yes. Obviously, the governor's following the CDC. Where do you weigh in on this?
Yeah, so this is a complex issue. Clearly, the virus will go to the pool of individuals where it can generate infection. The greatest number of those individuals are going to be children who haven't been vaccinated, since we haven't had an approved vaccine for the 2 and greater until recently. So, the virus seeks to continue to propagate. It seeks hosts that are vulnerable, children. Now, having said that, and what's the disparity here? Well, the WHO recognizes that children who do get SARS-CoV-2 often don't get the same severity of illness as an adult. And so maybe the cost-benefit ratio is not there for mask wearing. In the United States, I think wearing masks in school, where there's a lot of connection and a lot of contact with others who aren't vaccinated, makes pretty good sense at this point. Now, I'll tell you where the world's going to change is the world's going to change when we can vaccinate the 2 and greater. And that'll be an exciting opportunity where maybe at that point we could start shedding the masks.
Well, you think people are reluctant to get the vaccination themselves. When it comes to their children, I think they're going to be extremely reluctant, especially if they go again with the emergency approval and not full approval by the FDA. But you would suggest that they do.
Yeah, I mean, the data is supporting the safety of the vaccines. Certainly children early in life get vaccines, right? Larry, there's no argument there. You get pertussis, whooping cough, you get measles, all these. Now, there are people who have hesitance for all vaccines, and we're not really going to impact on them. But in this case, I hope the data is going to support the safety of these vaccines for COVID and allow us to get it into schools where they can get life back to normal.
One thing that people bring up a lot is why don't we give more credence to people that have had the vaccine having natural immunity? Do they have natural immunity, and do we know how long that lasts?
To the vaccine itself?
No, I'm sorry, natural immunity to COVID-19. If you had COVID-19,
yes.
Do you have the antibodies and how long do they last?
Yeah, that, we really don't know that for sure. We do know people can get reinfected. So that would suggest an impaired immune response to the vaccine. How prevalent that is and what is the incidence of that, we just don't know. There's been a lot of people infected, but at the same time, with all that infection, a lot of these people then got vaccinated, right? So we're not doing the natural history as to what's going to happen over a period of time. It is undoubtedly some people who got COVID-19 probably will never get the infection again. We just don't know what that percentage is.
And finally, I know Rutgers has been in the forefront at a lot of research with COVID-19. Do you have anything to report, or can you tell us what's going on now?
Yeah, well, we have lots of exciting news. We are a site for the Pfizer pediatric study that led to pushing it over the top to get it down to the 2 and over group. So that's certainly very exciting. We have ongoing studies in how to enhance COVID testing in underrepresented minority individuals in specific counties, Essex County being one, Middlesex another. We're trying to figure out how to improve our community-based communication through organizations that will embrace COVID testing in a very simple manner, and then hopefully can impact on vaccine hesitance in such populations. So lots happening at Rutgers in COVID, and I'll have more to report and come back, Larry.
Wonderful. We'd love to have you back. And that last study is so important because in study after study in cities across the country, the most reluctant to get vaccinated have been African Americans. And we won't get into the ugly history this country has had in vaccinations and the African American population, but there is a stubborn reason for that. So it's extremely important. I can't wait to hear the results of your study. Doctor, as always, you've been a wealth of information. Rutgers at the forefront in the study of COVID-19. Thank you so much for your time.
It's always a pleasure. Have a great day.
Dr. Ray Pennetieri, Vice Chancellor of Translational Medicine and Science at Rutgers University. Still to come on Jersey Matters, legislation is going to be introduced to make natural immunity from getting COVID-19 the same as getting a vaccine. We'll talk about it next. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. There's a debate in this country over natural immunity. The theory that if you already had COVID-19, you have immunity and you don't need a shot. Republican New Jersey State Senator Joe Panaccio from Morris County will introduce legislation to make natural immunity equivalent to getting a vaccine in New Jersey. Senator, thanks so much for your time. Explain this legislation that you're introducing about natural immunity.
Well, historically, medicine has shown us that when you get a disease, the body will fight it. The body will create cells and memorize exactly what it fought. That way, in the future, it calls upon those cells to either directly destroy that new infection or create antibodies, which it did in the first place, to fight that infection. That's natural immunity. Now, when you have an infection, your antibody levels go up, and then with time they go down. But that doesn't mean that the body forgets how to fight that infection. So what we're saying is, let's take a look at in the future, give these people legal parameters. That way they don't have to get vaccinated if they've already gotten the disease. Countries worldwide are starting to recognize this. In Europe, you have France and Italy and Germany. They said that if you had COVID infections, all you need is one shot. I don't know where they get the science for that, but they said at least they're looking at the science. Israel, quite frankly, has gone and said that if you have had COVID, then you are on equal par and you don't need vaccines to get what's called a green pass, which is their version of a passport in Israel. So they're recognizing the science. Europe is recognizing the science. So the question I have is, why aren't we?
You know, the science, the research for a long time was mixed on this. Some said you still would need a shot. Some said the immunity wasn't as good, but it does seem like the most recent studies, especially the one just done by the Cleveland Clinic, seems to show that natural immunity is more effective. There's less of a chance of you getting it again if you have natural immunity. As a matter of fact, the Cleveland Clinic just came out with a study that said if you have natural immunity, there's no sense in getting the vaccine. So the science is starting to back you up. However, still has been mixed. Do you believe that you have sufficient data to drive home your point?
Well, that shouldn't be my decision. I'm a politician. That should be the FDA and the CDC.
You're introducing legislation, excuse me, sir. But
right, but in order to create legal boundaries of what you can and can't do, where you could be held liable for that, Larry. We sent out a press release. And the press release had 4 footnotes, 4 links. Three of those links were very, very recent, within just a week or two. One link was from Israel, and it showed, besides the green pass, it showed that the potency of vaccines, natural immunity, was about 13 times greater than the potency of somebody that's been vaccinated. There was a story in the Wall Street Journal that cited Massachusetts, where there was breakthrough cases, quite a bit, with the Delta variant, and 3/4 of those breakthrough cases were what? They were people that had been vaccinated. So the science is out there. They should be studying the science. Nobody's ever told me what the tidal level in your blood has to be before you even consider getting, quote unquote, a booster shot or being vaccinated. Now, mind you, we've had this infection going on for almost 2 years now. Those are simple scientific questions. How much do you need in your system that's enough to fight off a disease? You may need more if you had comorbid issues, but what are the guidelines? We don't have those guidelines. What are the guidelines as far as the viral load that you must carry before you infect somebody? Almost 2 years now, we still don't have that. That's what we should be studying. That's what we should be pushing. Not politicians like me trying to determine what we shouldn't doing with passports or not having passports.
How would this work? I know if you get vaccinated, you get a vaccine card. Would you need a note from your doctor to say that I've had this and I have natural immunity?
You know, I am against having vaccine passports for people that have been vaccinated, and I'm against vaccine passports for people that have had natural immunity. I think this is something that has some personal responsibility. And you know that with all our attorney friends out there, they will litigate in case somebody does or doesn't. But as far as, creating a police state where we judge whether you have or haven't had that vaccine. And again, the messages that we're getting out there, Larry, they're very confusing. They've been very confusing right from the very beginning. Wear masks, don't wear masks, wear 2 masks. You should be vaccinated, you should get a booster. Even President Biden was pushing a booster on the public. And even the FDA said, whoa, slow down. We don't even know what the parameters are that you need a booster. What are the tidal levels when you need a booster? As a dentist, I had to have a hepatitis B shot. This is bloodborne. And then it was realized, well, before you get the hepatitis B shot booster, don't you think we should measure the amount of either antibodies or T cells within your system? Because we don't want to give you a booster if you don't need it. So from now on, a dentist, before he gets a booster, he has to have his blood levels checked to see if those antibody levels are requiring a booster or not. This is the virus. This should be very similar.
I guess I'm a little confused now because I thought that your legislation was so that those who have natural immunity and don't get the vaccine would not be discriminated against because they would have as much immunity as some research has shown as somebody who was vaccinated. But if there's no real benefit of being able to show you're vaccinated and have natural immunity, what's the point of the legislation?
Well, why bother that again? Why do you have to show a vaccine passport? You shouldn't have to show a vaccine passport.
But you do. I mean, people are doing it across the country right now, and there's businesses that don't allow you in, and private businesses are allowed to set their own rules. Businesses that don't let you in unless you can show vaccination. There's concerts right now in New Jersey that are happening that you have to show proof of vaccination. Well, are you saying that if you have natural immunity, you should have some type of way of being able to show it? So in these private businesses,
I'm saying that you're right. This is a work in progress. But what I'm saying is that if you have natural immunity, you should be treated no different than a person that has had the 2 shots or the 1 shot with J&J. What the legal ramifications, how we create that legislation, we're still doing that with the staff down in Trenton. Okay, but there really shouldn't be a difference, Larry, whether you've had COVID or whether you've been vaccinated. And by the way, I'm not against vaccinations. I think anybody that's over 60 years old or anybody certainly that has comorbid issues like diabetes and asthma and things like that, I would strongly suggest that they consider talking to the doctor about getting a vaccine.
Senator, as always, thank you so much for your time.
Larry, it's been my pleasure.
Republican State Senator Joe Panaccio, next on Jersey Matters.
Kids are finally back in their classrooms, and now vaccinating our children has come into question, and we'll speak with a pediatrician and some parents about how they plan to handle that decision. Coming up next on Jersey Matters.
I've heard people say they're going out for a run, but this is ridiculous. 60-year-old Ed Wickersham has run from Sandy Hook Point all the way down the Jersey coast to Cape May Point. That's a little over 130 miles. It took Ed 4 days to achieve his lifetime goal, and he hopes to inspire others to never give up on their goals. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. The FDA is expected to approve COVID-19 vaccines for elementary school children in the next few weeks. But as Jersey Matters' Kimberly Kravitz now tells us, that doesn't mean New Jersey parents approve of the vaccine for their children. Kimberly.
So Pfizer's reported that its COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective for children ages 5 through 11, a key step toward vaccinating our youth. But how are New Jersey parents feeling about having to make that decision?
I think that a vaccine should not require a marketing campaign and mandates for parents to want to give it to their child.
BRENNA DILLON, parent of 2, is against any mandate that would require vaccinating her children. Earlier this week, Governor Murphy announced that toddlers as young as 2 years old will be forced to mask up in daycare.
I was gutted by it. She's never worn a mask. Even at the doctor, I had to take her to the emergency room over the summer. She didn't even have to wear one there.
You don't need to be an epidemiologist or a pediatrician or some kind of other medical professional to know that if you're restricting a young child's ability to breathe for 6 to 10 hours per day, you can't tell me that's healthy.
Ryan Cody, parent of 3, is against his young children having to wear masks throughout the school day, and he has no intention on vaccinating his children either.
Is the risk of the vaccine higher for my children than the potential benefit? And I've come to the conclusion that it is for young, healthy children who are virtually at extremely low, as statistically close to 0 chance of death as you can get for a young child. My wife's fully vaccinated. I am not. I'm actually open to the vaccine. I just need to see a little bit more research.
Cody is running for the Board of Education in his town, and I asked him how teachers might feel about having classrooms filled with unvaccinated students.
They should be protected. They should be fully vaxxed themselves. If teachers are really afraid about COVID-19, and some of them do have reason to be, we should be flexible. The schools in the state of New Jersey were awarded a lot of money per the ESSER grants. We have the ability, the capability, and the funds to accommodate everybody.
Many of the parents I spoke with who do have plans on vaccinating their child were uninterested in sharing their thoughts on camera. But Dana McFerrin was open and honest about her decision.
As a parent, how horrible would I feel knowing that I didn't do everything I could for my child to prevent something? And I think it's very important that they get vaccinated. If I can provide that little bit of extra defense for my child so they don't get it as bad, so they don't have to be hospitalized.
The spike in the Delta variant as children return back to school is one of the main reasons that vaccinations for youngsters have come into question.
Yeah, the Delta variant is a game changer for COVID. The Delta variant is much more infectious than the previous variants of COVID. And it's so important then that as we are faced with the Delta variant, that number one, we vaccinate those who are eligible to get vaccinated. So all adults around children need to get vaccinated. That's the number one way that we're going to help protect our children. Number two, in the classrooms, the kids that are eligible to be vaccinated, they should be vaccinated.
Around 13 million children under the age of 18 have received at least one dose of a COVID vaccine, according to an American Academy of Pediatrics analysis of CDC data as of September 15th.
The problem, though, is still that even healthy people can get quite sick with COVID. We've seen children in our children's hospital who had no pre-existing conditions, very sick, in the intensive care unit.
So how soon can our younger children become vaccinated? Some trial data has become available to the public, but a formal application must be submitted in order to be approved for emergency use authorization. Pfizer intends to submit this data by the end of the month. Reporting for Jersey Matters from K. Hovnanian Children's Hospital, I'm Kimberly Kravitz.
Thank you, Kimberly. Next on Jersey Matters.
I'm Phil Andrews. Coming up on Jersey Matters, we'll talk about a shortage of school bus drivers here in the Garden State.
Camden is facing a shortage of bus drivers and is offering parents $1,000 to drive their own kids to Camden City schools. When that's not an option, the school district is also willing to provide free monthly New Jersey Transit bus tickets. Welcome back. Camden isn't the only school district in the state dealing with COVID-related problems. As Jersey Matters' Phil Andrews tells us now, every school district in the state is dealing with some issue related to COVID. Phil.
Well, it certainly was a tough start to the school year here in the Garden State as parents had to consider sending their children back into the classroom, thinking about mask mandates, vaccines, and of course now there's another issue to worry about.
Yep, there's a shortage of school bus drivers, and it's become a nationwide issue. In Glassboro, the school district changed its dismissal times for several schools because 8 drivers resigned prior to the start of the school year. And here in Washington Township, they're down 10 drivers, which, as you would expect, has created some problems.
It's a very stressful work environment right now. We have some drivers that will do a route for a school and then have to go back and do a different route for the same school to make sure that these students actually get to school. Getting them home can be difficult because obviously we have parents waiting at bus stops for students, and sometimes these buses run late. So it's just a case of cramming as much physical driving time into the allotted paid time.
And Ms. Kosar just said the magic words, allotted pay time, because it appears the pay scale for school bus drivers is one of the top issues in the declining numbers.
We definitely need to compensate drivers for the level of skills that they have driving these students to school safely. We have, state mandated checks that we have to do with our buses every day to make sure they're safe to drive. We have standards that we have to adhere to while we're driving. We obviously can't have more students on a bus than the bus is allowed to take. We have to make sure these students are seat belted at all times. And it's been an issue over the last many years that our support staff, our non-certified staff in schools, are not paid as we feel that they should be.
And then, of course, there is the issue of COVID-19.
I think a lot of people are taking early retirement because the issue is ongoing and it's fluctuating. People are scared. You know, on a school bus, you perhaps have 52 students on a school bus. It's almost impossible to make sure everyone wears a mask. You can't discipline a student for not wearing a mask. But the safety of everybody on that school bus, especially the driver, is a concern.
Meanwhile, prior to the Gloucester Township School Board meeting this week, teachers protesting that they are currently working without a contract, which, by the way, expired back on June 30th.
We pivoted on a dime during this whole pandemic for the past year and a half. They threw... make it work. Yep, they threw new technology at us, and we had to learn it in 24 hours and have it up and running.
Now, there are about 100 other school districts throughout New Jersey where teachers are working without contracts. And because teachers are not allowed to strike, the frustration comes from basically being at the mercy of their respective school boards.
You know, it can start to, impact things like, just morale and other things that you don't want to have, seeping into a school or district. So you try not to have that happen that often. And if you're a district that repeatedly goes without figuring out your contract before the next one, needs to start, you develop a pattern there that certainly can have a negative effect long-term as well.
And while there are those currently working without contracts, there are other teachers and support staff around the state being laid off by their school districts.
In Gloucester Township, for Jersey Matters, I'm Phil Andrews.
Hola, les saluda Jennifer Marín y de parte de nuestro equipo, feliz mes de la herencia hispana.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. Over the last few weeks, we've reported on several shortages due to COVID-19, and now there is a report of a shortage of available houses. For that, we talk with Alan Malik, Senior Fellow at the Center for Community Progress. Sir, thank you so much for your time today. Let's get a general outlook. How is the New Jersey housing market doing post-pandemic?
Well, so far, the New Jersey housing market is very hot. I mean, there's little supply and a lot of demand, and house prices have gone up dramatically, I'd say, by something close to 25% over the past year or so.
What is the effect of that when housing goes up that much? There has to be a trickle-down effect to everyone when houses are selling like that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what you're seeing now is that even in areas like the urban centers that were really pretty stagnant as far as prices were concerned until very recently, you're seeing prices going up as a definite sort of being pulled along by the market.
Are people then priced out of the housing market? Housing availability has always been a problem in New Jersey for those who don't make enough money. Has that gotten worse?
That has absolutely gotten worse. I mean, it's been bad for a long time. And despite, lots of people's efforts to try to create affordable housing and so forth, huge numbers of people in this state have been priced out of housing, and it's definitely getting worse.
How is the inventory, not just for those who are low or middle income, but for everybody? I just read a story recently on NJ.com that there are 25 areas in the state where there's barely any housing inventory left.
It wouldn't surprise me. What happened is it's really kind of amazing. I mean, the inventory wasn't that high, compared to the demand even before the pandemic. And then what you had simultaneously was people stopped listing their houses, didn't want to show them. So the inventory dropped dramatically. I think I'm estimating from the beginning of the pandemic to recently by something like 50%. And at the same time, there were lots of people in the market. So that's really what created the crunch, was the fact that the supply declined precisely at a point when a lot more people than I think anybody expected were coming into the market.
Well, you need two to tango, right? So that's why there were more houses available. But then there was a lot of people, more people wanting to buy than there were houses, which is what drove up the prices. What was it about the pandemic that made people want to go out and buy a house?
Well, I think there were two things going on. The first was not strictly pandemic related, was the fact that mortgage interest rates dropped and remained unbelievably low. I mean, when you can get a mortgage interest rate at 2.5%, all of a sudden you're looking at your rental, the apartment you've been renting, and say, why am I paying this kind of money when I can buy a house for less? So that was the first thing. And the second thing was, in contrast to what a lot of people, myself included, expected, instead of people hunkering down during the pandemic and saying, I better stay at home and stay here for the duration, people said, I'd like to go somewhere else. I'd like to get out of the city and get some country. I'd like to find a bigger place and so forth. So instead of demand declining with the pandemic, demand actually increased. So between that and low mortgage interest rates, there are huge numbers of people coming into the market and very little housing on offer for them.
Right. The story is about the housing market right after, well, I can't even say it's right after the pandemic because we're still suffering through it, but right after the shutdown, there was some anecdotal stories about people getting offers 25% over what they were asking for, 15% over what they were asking for immediately. And so it was and continues to be a hot market, but there are stories that at least the national market is slowing down. Is New Jersey also cooling off?
I think it's starting to slow down. We're starting to see inventory start to pick up. I think some of that immediate push of I want to get out of the city into the country has kind of abated. So I think if you look at the next year, I think we're going to see not a bubble bursting or anything like that. I don't think this is a bubble. But we're going to see a calming. I think price increases are going to start to level off. Inventories start coming back to something resembling normal levels. I know I've talked to people in a number of parts of the country, and there definitely is indications that the inventory is increasing.
Thank you so much, sir, for all the information. You've been a wealth of information, and I appreciate your time. Alan Malik, Senior Fellow at the Center for Community Progress. Still to come on Jersey Matters. Now there's a report that there's a shortage of liquor caused by COVID-19. We'll talk about it next. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. On this show alone, we have covered several shortages caused by the COVID-19 pandemic in the state. A school bus driver shortage, a teacher shortage, a housing shortage, and now a liquor shortage? Here's Paul Santel, owner of New Jersey Discount Liquor and president of the New Jersey Liquor Association. Hi, Paul. Thanks so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. So how we keep hearing about a shortage of liquor. Is it true, and how bad is it?
Yeah, it's a genuine shortage. It started right around the beginning of COVID, and it's only gotten worse right now. Unfortunately, we all were hoping in the alcohol industry in the state of New Jersey, at least, and probably across the country, that things would smooth out in the supply chain, the distribution network that's been set up for probably 80 years in the country, and we've been dealing with a lot of outages, between last year and this year that seem to be coming to a head right now, that as bars and restaurants have opened up, pre-summer, there was, I think, an additional stress that was put on the system, the distribution system, going from about 2,000 licenses in New Jersey to over 8,000 licenses, all of a sudden putting orders in for alcohol. And here we are three months since June, when restaurants are fully opened up, and we're having some major problems. In the whole summer, everyone experienced, in every tier of our industry, suppliers, wholesalers, and retailing, problems, and consumers for that matter, problems with getting what they're used to getting, in stores and restaurants and bars.
You said major problems. How has this affected you?
Well, yeah, we're out of. I was just downstairs a few minutes ago on my selling floor of my store with a few customers, and they don't understand. They've been. One of them told me that we're the fifth store they've been to. I don't. It's it's still morning time right now. We're the fifth store they've been to this morning, looking for something very specific in beer. And I'm like, it's not available. I haven't had that in weeks, I said, and it's been hit or miss when it comes in. My supplier doesn't even know when it's going to come till about 16 hours before the truck shows up. And then it's just a matter of how much they really get. And then if we're fortunate, we cross our fingers, it shows up, in our store, and it's usually gone in a few days, that particular product, so it's pretty serious. That when I can tell you that when it comes to the beer, I'll go through each segment. In the beer segment right now, I would say almost 1/3 of the products that we typically would have on hand are not available right now. So I'm speaking to you, which is unheard of, mass brands, as well as more craft oriented kind of brands. But it's a major problem when you're looking at things like Budweiser and Bud Light, Coors and Miller and Corona and Modelo and Stella, that you don't have in some instances, weeks will go by, not a single package in your store for some of those items. And that's unheard of in all my, 4 decades of doing retailing the way I've done it here at this one store in Perth Amboy. Never seen anything like this.
So far, all you've talked about is beer. It affects other products as well. It affects wine and liquors as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a problem with major categories, not only in beer, but also with spirits. When you get to tequila, there's everything from Don Julio, Casamigos, Patron, you name it, the major heavy hitting tequilas that are not a bit. Clase Azul, another one that are, in every size of the package that's made, almost every type, a variety of those tequilas. There's Reposado, there's Aneos, there's Blancos. Not available. And again, tequilas are doing very well. I get it. There's supply and demand issues that you always face when things spike, but there's just a problem in the whole distribution chain right now. Tequilas, you get into other spirits, you get into categories like scotches, Johnny Walker, High Marquise, Johnny Walker Blue, Gold, green. It's just hit or miss. It's really almost impossible to get those packages.
I hope you and every industry and all of us can make our way through this, but because we need our spirits, we need our liquors, especially in these times. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it.
All right. And I appreciate it too. Thank you very much.
Paul Santel, president of the New Jersey Liquor Association. Next on Jersey Matters.
It's Prostate Cancer Awareness Month, and one New Jersey man who beat the disease is urging others to take their annual checkups seriously. More on that story next.
Two New Jersey animal rescue groups are on their way to Lake Charles, Louisiana, to help the animals and residents impacted by Hurricane Ida. The founders of the Wolfpack 007 Tiny Animal Rescue and East Coast Paws and Claws left Barnegat Township Friday morning. They'll be back next week with dogs who need loving foster homes. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. September is Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. Did you know that prostate cancer is the second leading cause of cancer death among American men? Jersey Matters' Jennifer Marin spoke with a urologist who tells you everything you need to know to protect yourself or the men in your life. Jennifer.
Larry, apart from skin cancer, prostate cancer is the most common cancer among men. Now, it can be treated successfully, but the key is to catch it on time.
Kimberly and Rudy Mans say they'll never forget the day Dr. Mina Pham delivered the news that no family wants to hear.
He said when he walked in the room, Mr. Mans, I have bad news, you have cancer.
Rudy, a former state police officer, says his job required he undergo yearly checkups, a habit he continued after he retired, a habit that saved his life.
I had blood tests done every year, and I noticed that my PSA was going up 3 consecutive years, so I contacted my urologist, Dr. Pham, And he interned in an MRI, which turned into a biopsy. And then he sat us down one day in his office and said, I got bad news, you have prostate cancer.
Rudy, his wife, and Dr. Pham discussed the two options available for treating his cancer.
The main two options are radiation treatments and surgery. And for men that are younger and healthier, I tend to favor surgery just because of the long-term side effects that radiation can have. Surgery can also have its side effects. But in Rudy's case, I thought surgery was his best option.
Rudy says that to some degree, he felt scared, but that Dr. Pham's plan gave him a sense of peace.
There's always fear when you hear cancer, but with Dr. Pham, he was very reassuring and he's very confident when he speaks. So I couldn't help but feel that he was on top of it already.
Thankfully, Rudy's surgery was a success.
It was just the best news. We felt like we could live again, and we just look at life a lot differently now.
According to Dr. Pham, 1 in 8 men in their lifetime are diagnosed with prostate cancer. Rudy was one of those men, but thanks to his consistent checkups, he's been cancer-free for over a year and has this advice.
If you want to be alive and watch your grandkids and maybe your grandkids' kids stay around for a few more years, then just get a PSA test. It doesn't hurt. It's just so simple. Go see your doctor.
According to Dr. Pham, some men should begin testing at a younger age.
African Americans and those of Caribbean descent have a higher rate of prostate cancer, and those people should be screened earlier in their life, either starting at age 40 or 45, depending on their family history. Also, those with a strong family history should be evaluated.
Like any cancer, there's always a chance of reoccurrence, but Dr. Pham has high hopes for Rudy.
I think he's going to do well long term, which is great, and that's kind of our goal for every patient.
According to the American Cancer Society, almost 250,000 men in the United States will be diagnosed with prostate cancer this year, and nearly 34,000 of them will die from it.
Researchers have found that men with high levels of vitamin D seem to have a lower risk of developing the more lethal forms of prostate cancer. For now, reporting in Neptune, for Jersey Matters, I'm Jennifer Marin.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. My commentary is next. We are right now standing at the precipice of a presidential showdown between current President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. A showdown that will make history and set a legal precedent that will affect every future president. It has to do with the Congressional Select Committee's investigation into what caused the Capitol riot on January 6th. The committee wants Department of Justice documents on what President Trump was doing during the riot, who he talked to, and what he said. Former President Trump has hinted that he's going to claim executive privilege. Now, executive privilege, simply put, is the executive branch's right to keep some documents confidential, especially from a congressional investigation. President Trump used executive privilege more than any other president, but to be fair, he was investigated by Congress and by the Justice Department more than any other president, even before he took office. You might be surprised to know that executive privilege is not in the United States Constitution, but then again, neither is congressional oversight of the executive branch. But the Supreme Court has ruled that both are vital to separation of power, something that is the foundation of our government. Several past presidents have claimed executive privilege to keep sensitive documents away from prying eyes. It has always been a courtesy that the current administration gives to past presidents. But that was in calmer, less hyper-partisan times, when politics wasn't so angry and hateful. So now, the executive privilege claim of a past president is about to be challenged. The Washington Post is reporting that President Joe Biden is leaning towards releasing all documents relating to Donald Trump and January 6 to Congress. There is no question that Trump's lawyers will challenge the release in court and ask for an injunction. And then it will end up in the Supreme Court, where it may be decided once and for all if a past president has the right to executive privilege, something that will affect all future presidents, including Joe Biden. Now, it's important to point out that Donald Trump has not claimed executive privilege yet, but it seems like a certainty after he released this statement. Executive privilege will be defended, not just on my behalf or the patriots that work beside me, but on behalf of the President of the United States and the future of our nation. Now, since there's really no constitutional foundation for any of this, the Supreme Court, when they get the case, will rely on a past ruling that you're going to start hearing a lot about. The 1977 Supreme Court case, Nixon versus the Administrator of General Services. Now, the General Services Administration, or GSA, is an independent government agency that, among other things, is the keeper of most federal records and documents. After he had already resigned from office, Richard Nixon claimed executive privilege to try to keep all of the White House audio recordings. The Supreme Court ruled that he had every right to claim executive privilege as a former president. So Donald Trump does have some legal standing when and if the documents are released, and right now it seems like they're going to be. Michael Gwynn is a spokesperson for President Biden, and he released this statement about the January 6 transcripts. The president is deeply committed to ensuring that something like this never happens again, and he supports a thorough investigation into what occurred. It's important to point out that Gwynn is a longtime Democratic operative who knows all too well that the president desperately needs something to take the nation's attention away from the crisis at the border, the crisis in Afghanistan, the rise in crime, the rise in COVID cases, and the rise in inflation. All of that has caused a dramatic drop in President Biden's approval rating. The just released Gallup tracking poll shows that only 43% of Americans approve of the job the president is doing. 53% disapprove. That's the worst Gallup poll numbers since the president was sworn into office, and they keep going down. What better way to steal all of the attention and change the narrative than a very public legal battle with former President Donald Trump over the January 6 Capitol riot? Most Americans are disgusted by what happened on January 6, and that's why the Democrats want to keep the investigation going about the Capitol riot, because they know it's a political winner, and they haven't had many wins lately. It seems certain that President Biden will try to release the January 6 documents, making the same political calculation. But there is a risk that it could backfire. Banned from social media, Donald Trump has been trying to get back in the public spotlight with rallies and Fox News interviews. But a legal fight with the Biden administration will raise his stature and give him the attention he craves. I'm Larry Menti. We'll talk again soon.